Most of us want to be like someone else in life, right? You know, there's someone you look up to, someone you say, I wish my life was more like that. For me, that person is Ezra Levant. Not only does Ezra have an amazing amount of vacation, but last week he comes back for one day, does his show, and then leaves again and goes to the ski slopes and calls it work. Yes, I'm not joking, folks, but Ezra Levant's back now, joins us now. Ezra, how did you call this work, going to the ski slopes? Come on.
Well, I take any opportunity to go back home to Alberta, and I was asked to go to Sunshine Ski Resort in Banff because a guy named Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's the nephew of JFK, has an environmental group called the Waterkeepers Alliance, and he was having a big party in Banff where he invited a few dozen of his fancy Hollywood friends to talk about the environment. I thought, well, you know what? I'm interested in the environment. All Canadians are. We're talking about the oil pipelines. Let me go there with a Sun cameraman and talk to these folks on the ski hill. So I did. I didn't do any skiing myself, but I stood at the bottom of a toboggan run and I just talked to them about the oil sands. I didn't get to talk to Robert F. Kennedy himself, and he probably would have been really rambunctious and argy-bargy, but yeah. I talked to a dozen celebrities. Brian, I got to tell you, I was surprised by how generous they were about Canada, how not condescending they were, and shockingly, how pro-ethical oil they were. Celebrities at an environmental event. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I caught a bunch of this on your show last night because, of course, I watched The Source. So we wanted to bring you on, talk a little bit about this, and then we'll get to the Prime Minister and his comments about the whole dispute about pipelines. Ed Begley Jr. surprised you. Let's play a clip of Ed Begley first and then get to you. Big and viral guy, Ed Begley.
I wouldn't presume to dictate what you do in this great country. You're protecting the environment in a wonderful way, but we have decisions to make about the pipeline going through our country. And I've always been pushing renewables as an alternative. And so I have a solar-powered house, and I drive an electric vehicle around LA. So as much of that as we can do, I think renewables is a key. And we need, in the meantime, some fossil fuels, certainly. So you guys get to decide what happens here in your good country, and we're going to make some decisions in the States. And I'm not in favor of the pipeline personally.
I think a completely reasonable position, one that you can have a discussion and debate. What I've always liked about him is that he seems to walk the talk.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he had a whole reality show about his eco houses. Sort of drives his wife nuts because everything's recycled and solar power, this and that. I mean, he spends a lot of money on that energy poverty lifestyle. You and I couldn't live like him. It takes a millionaire to live that poorly. But look at what he did. First of all, he said, I'm not going to tell you Canadians what to do with your pipeline. Well, I appreciate that. That's respecting our sovereignty, which a lot of these American groups don't do. Second thing is, at the end there, he said, I want renewables, but in the meantime, we do need some fossil fuels. That's just being realistic. And again, he would know because he tries hard in his own way to be an eco guy. I thought he was friendly. I mean, he was on the ski slopes having fun, and I come up, start talking politics. He gave me a few minutes, and I thought he was a nice guy.
Now, you wasn't so friendly with back into the danger zone man, Kenny Loggins. Let's play Kenny, and then I'll let you, as soon as Kenny ends, you start talking.
Okay.
Your premise of your question is incorrect. The premise of your question is incorrect. It's not an either-or.
What was that about?
Now, I had asked him, like, same thing with Ed Begley. I said, look, until we get to that fantasy fuel of the future that's perfect in every way other than it doesn't exist, we got to buy fuels now. So I asked him the question, would you rather buy fuel from ethical sources like Canada or from OPEC? He wouldn't answer. So I said, look, you flew here and then you drove here, pointing out that he's still using fossil fuels, and he wouldn't have any of it. Because you know what? I hate this. I wasn't being mean. I mean, he could have skied away at any time. I was just trying to point out the difference between he's all anti-oil, but he loves his jet fuel, like a jet setter.
Yeah, I mean, he's at a ski resort that exists for rich people to fly into. I guess locals can go as well, but mostly it's people that are well-heeled that can fly into these places, spend a bit of time at the slopes, drive up their carbon footprint, then go home and feel good about themselves for being in nature.
You know, I talked to Alicia Silverstone, and she said, hey, everybody, you should carpool. And I just chuckled to myself. I thought, I wonder when the last time that Hollywood celebrity was in a carpool. Now, Alicia was very friendly. She wasn't angry like Kenny Loggins was. I mean, she was just a nice girl having fun on the slopes. And I mean, listen, I wasn't playing gotcha with any of these folks. I mean, they were just skiing by. I was asking them questions. But I think I came a little close to Kenny Loggins' pride when I said, well, if you're against oil, how did you get here from L.A.? Unless you bicycled in the winter, you're a jet fuel user more than most. I think he's more of a hypocrite than Ed Begley Jr. for sure.
Well, let's get to a guy who's known for outbursts. Alec Baldwin, not sure if you asked what was in his wallet, but you did ask him about oil. Here it goes.
Well, I would probably say probably a mix of both. Because I think that the costs, energy-wise, to extract the oil from the sands, it's a massive footprint left from the process itself. The process itself is not a clean process.
So that's you asking Alec Baldwin about ethical oil versus Saudi oil?
I mean, he drove up in an SUV. He was actually driving himself. I was impressed that these folks didn't have big fancy chauffeurs. And he got out, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and I said, look, if you had a gas pump, one said made in Canada, and one pump said made in Saudi, I said, which would you choose for your SUV? And he said a mix of both. And I thought that's a bit of a politician's cop-out. But seriously, is he engaging in a moral equivalence between the way we produce oil and the way they do in Saudi Arabia? I mean, Saudi Arabia, no rights for women, no democracy for anyone, really. Very poor on the environment, treat workers awfully. I mean, just a really bad, and warmongers versus us. And seriously, he was equal between the two? I thought he failed that answer. But the good news is, Brian, 10 out of 12 celebrities I asked said they prefer ethical oil from Canada over conflict oil from OPEC.
Okay, let's get quickly. Not all of them do. Robert Redford, Kevin Bacon, both speaking out against pipelines and against Canadian oil. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say about the whole issue of foreign involvement last night in an interview with CBC's Peter Mansbridge.
I think, Peter, it's one thing in terms of whether Canadians, want jobs, to what degree Canadians want environmental protection. These are all valid questions. But just because certain people in the United States would like to see Canada be one giant national park for the northern half of North America, I don't think that's part of what our review process is all about. Our process is there to determine what the needs and desires of Canadians are.
Well, Ezra, we're going to have to cut there and not get too much of a reaction, but I'll say this. Congratulations, you are changing the conversation about oil in this country and this continent, because those discussions, the Prime Minister and the questions wouldn't have been asked a couple of years ago.
Well, look, I think there's pro and con for this pipeline, but let's have that decision made between Canadians. I don't want foreigners like the Rockefeller Foundation in the States and other foundations spending hundreds of millions of dollars funding anti-Canadian groups to jam this pipeline review panel. 4,500 people have signed up to speak, 1/3 of them from one single NGO.
Yeah, well, exactly. Ezra, thanks so much.